I never imagined my life would change in the blink of an eye. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when I received the call that would shatter everything. The call came from Nathan, my younger brother, the one I had protected, helped, and supported for years. "Rebecca," he started, his voice tight, "I know what you did." I froze. His words didn't make sense. I was used to hearing accusations and stress from him. He'd always been the one to lean on me, never the other way around, but never like this. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "I know you conspired with Amy," he spat, his voice trembling with anger. "You manipulated her into giving you control of Sophie's inheritance. You stole it from me, Rebecca, from your brother." I could feel the air around me shift. The accusation hit harder than anything I'd ever heard from him. My hands shook as I gripped the phone, my throat tightening. Nathan, accusing me of stealing from him, of betraying the very woman who had made me the trustee of my niece's future? I hadn't even had a chance to react when he added, "And now you've turned our whole family against me. They all believe you. They think I'm the villain." His words were a punch to the gut. My family, the same people who had known me my whole life, now sided with him without question. Nathan, who had moved his mistress into the house barely a month after Amy passed, who barely even cried at her funeral, was now the one painting himself as the victim. "I didn't steal anything," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Amy trusted me, Nathan. She wanted me to protect Sophie. She didn't trust you with it because she knew you would waste it." There was silence on the other end, but I could hear his heavy breathing. Then, with a chilling calmness, he responded, "You're lying, Rebecca. You've always been the smarter one, the better one, and now you want to take everything from me." The tears threatened to spill, but I pushed them back, swallowing the pain that knotted in my chest. I had spent years helping him, sacrificing my own peace of mind for his, and this was how he repaid me? I could hear Sophie in the background calling for her dad. It broke my heart in ways I didn't even know were possible. This was more than just a fight over money. It was the last straw. And what hurt the most was that Nathan wasn't just angry. He was terrified. Terrified of losing everything. But what about me? What about the trust Amy had placed in me? I didn't know it then, but this phone call was just the beginning. What I thought was a family conflict was about to turn into something far darker, and I had no idea how much my life was about to unravel. But one thing was clear. My brother had just declared war, and I was standing on the front lines. I'm Rebecca, 38 years old, and this is where my story begins, though it didn't seem like much of a story at first. It was just the life I had lived, the life I had built, a life where I thought I knew what it meant to be a sister, a daughter, and a protector. But I've learned the hard way that nothing is ever as simple as it seems. I grew up in a small town where nothing ever really changed. Our parents were always there, solid and steady, working hard to provide for Nathan and me. My dad was a high school teacher, and my mom worked part-time at a local bakery. We lived comfortably, but never extravagantly. That was fine with me. My world was the steady rhythm of family dinners, school projects, and the occasional vacation to a nearby lake. But when I was 23, everything changed. Our parents died in a car accident. Just like that, I was suddenly thrust into a role I wasn't prepared for. Nathan, at 20, was still in college, struggling with the idea of losing them. He was overwhelmed, unsure of what to do next. As for me, I had just finished college and was stepping into my first job in finance. I thought I was still figuring out my own life, but suddenly, I was the one who had to make decisions. Nathan dropped out of school to take on a full-time job because, in his words, it was his responsibility. He said I shouldn't have to worry about him, that he was a man and it was time he took care of things. Even though I offered to help financially, he refused, believing it was something he had to do on his own. I respected his pride, but over time, I couldn't help but feel resentment creeping in. He was my little brother, and I had always taken care of him, even when he didn't ask. I finished college, started my career, and built a solid financial foundation for myself. But Nathan never got to finish school. He worked in construction management, which paid okay, but nothing like what I was earning. Still, I always tried to help him out, even if it meant putting my own money on the line. I paid for his wedding venue when he married Amy, helped with the down payment on their house, bought Sophie's swing set and trampoline. Nathan never asked for any of it. I gave it freely, thinking it was just what family did. And then there was Amy. Amy, with her sparkling blue eyes and an air of wealth that I could never quite shake. She was everything I wasn't, from money, from privilege. Amy's parents had owned car dealerships, and when they sold everything and retired to Florida, Amy inherited a sizable fortune. She had a trust fund that gave her access to wealth as soon as she turned 25. After Sophie was born, she didn't need to work. Nathan's salary paid for their basic expenses, while Amy's trust funded the extras, their vacations, Sophie's private school tuition, their fancy cars. I used to think that Amy had it all. She was beautiful, confident, and in love with Nathan. They seemed like the perfect couple, despite their occasional struggles. But as I would come to learn, Amy wasn't just another rich woman who wanted for nothing. She had fears, too. Fears for Sophie's future, especially after the diagnosis. Amy had breast cancer. It was aggressive, the kind that left her weak but determined. I watched her fight with everything she had: chemo, radiation, surgeries, and there were moments where she seemed to be improving, but it always came back worse. I had never seen someone so young, so vibrant, face death so courageously, but watching her decline was unbearable. Sophie, only 5 at the time, didn't understand what was happening. I tried to shield her from the worst of it, but Amy was a mother, first and foremost. She was scared for Sophie's future. It was during one of our coffee meetings, when Amy was thinner than I had ever seen her, that she finally brought it up, the conversation that would change everything. "I need to talk to you about something," Amy said, her voice strained with fatigue. "I've been thinking about what will happen to Sophie when I'm gone." She went on, telling me about her concerns regarding Nathan's impulsiveness with money. She said she loved him, but she didn't trust him to handle Sophie's inheritance responsibly. Amy said Nathan had always been terrible with money. His impulse to buy a boat when they didn't even need one was just one example. She wanted to know if I would step in, if I would be the one to take control of Sophie's trust when the time came. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't sure I could take on that responsibility, but Amy was insistent. She said I was the obvious choice, that I had always been careful with money, and that Sophie deserved the best future possible. Amy's request wasn't a simple one. It wasn't just about the money. It was about Sophie's well-being. Amy trusted me, and though I was reluctant, I agreed. 2 weeks later, Amy's lawyer drew up the papers. I became the trustee of Sophie's inheritance. I agreed to keep it all quiet until after Amy's death, something she insisted on to avoid confrontation with Nathan. And then, a few months later, Amy was gone. In the weeks after Amy's death, things didn't settle as I had hoped. Everyone expected me to just step into the role Amy had left behind, to care for Sophie as if nothing had changed. But the truth was, everything had changed. Nathan's grief was palpable, but so was his anger. At first, he seemed lost, barely able to get out of bed some mornings. He had always been the type to bury his feelings beneath a tough exterior, but now even I couldn't ignore the cracks in his facade. He didn't talk about Amy, not in any meaningful way. His sadness, though real, was overshadowed by a different emotion, a growing sense of entitlement, of confusion over the trust. When we gathered for the will reading, I could tell Nathan wasn't just upset about Amy's passing. He was upset about the decisions she made in the final months of her life, specifically about the trust. The moment he learned that I was the trustee, his face twisted in disbelief, then anger. He didn't say anything right away, but I could feel his eyes on me as if I were the one who had betrayed him. "I thought everything was supposed to go to Sophie," Nathan finally said after the lawyer finished reading the will. His voice trembled slightly, like a child's, but the accusation was clear. "Not you." I tried to stay calm. I explained as gently as I could that the money was for Sophie's care, that Amy had made me the trustee because she trusted me to manage it responsibly. But Nathan wasn't listening. His frustration, already on edge after months of losing his wife, began to spill over in ugly ways. "She didn't trust me," Nathan spat, his voice louder now. "She thought I'd blow it all, didn't she?" I could feel the weight of the room pressing down on me. His words were harsh, but they weren't the worst of it. That came next. "I can't believe you would conspire with her," he accused, his voice rising. "You knew what she was doing, and you kept it from me. You poisoned her against me." He was shouting now, pacing the small office, his face red with fury. I was stunned. Poisoned her against him? Amy had chosen me as trustee because she thought Nathan couldn't be trusted to manage the money for Sophie's future, but I never imagined he would think of it as a betrayal, a plot against him. He had always been so sure of himself, so proud of his role as her husband, but now he was unraveling. "I didn't poison anyone against you, Nathan," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "Amy made these decisions herself. She had her reasons, and she trusted me." "Her reasons?" He laughed bitterly. "Her reason was that you're better than me, always have been, always getting everything you want, graduating, making all the money, and I'm just the guy who gets left behind." His words cut deeper than I expected. His jealousy, his resentment, all of it was bubbling to the surface in a way I couldn't ignore. For years, I'd been the one to help him. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I was seeing it all through a different lens. Nathan wasn't just upset about the money. He was angry at me for succeeding where he felt he had failed. It wasn't just about Amy's death. It was about the life we'd lived together, the one where he had always felt overshadowed by me. "I didn't choose this, Nathan. I didn't ask for any of this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But Amy trusted me with Sophie's future. That's all I'm trying to do. Keep her future secure." But Nathan wasn't hearing any of it. "I should have control of Sophie's inheritance," he said, more calmly now, but his voice still held that bitter edge. "I'm her father. I should be the one making decisions, not you." The conversation ended there. We left the lawyer's office without another word, but the seed of conflict had been planted, and I could feel it growing in the pit of my stomach. I knew Nathan wasn't going to let this go. I knew he would fight me for control over Sophie's inheritance, and I wasn't sure how much further he would go to get it. In the weeks that followed, the tension didn't fade. Nathan's behavior started to change. He moved Jennifer, his girlfriend, into the house within a month of Amy's death, as though nothing had ever happened. It was a move that left me disgusted, but I said nothing. What good would it have done to point out how disrespectful it was to Amy's memory, to Sophie's grieving heart? But it wasn't just that. Nathan started making unreasonable requests for money from the trust. Sophie's tuition? Fine, I approved it. Her dance classes? Of course. But then Nathan asked for money to renovate the kitchen, buy new furniture, and take Jennifer on a vacation to Hawaii. He said it was for Sophie's benefit because she lived in the house, but I knew better. These were personal expenses, not things that would help Sophie in any meaningful way. I denied every request that wasn't strictly necessary, but Nathan didn't take it well. In fact, his anger grew. It wasn't just the money, it was everything. He started telling everyone in the family that I was taking his money, that I was trying to control everything, that I had stolen from him. And then came the ultimate betrayal. Nathan had the audacity to turn our entire family against me. Aunt Shirley called me one afternoon in tears, telling me how Nathan had painted me as a villain. No one would talk to me anymore. My cousins wouldn't return my calls. It felt like the ground beneath me had cracked open, and I was sinking deeper with each passing day. The hardest part? I couldn't prove I was doing the right thing. There was no legal or emotional evidence to back up my actions, only the word of a man who had been left with nothing but anger and pride. And as much as I wanted to defend myself, I wasn't sure how to make them see that I was protecting Sophie, not just the money. That was all that mattered to me. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never imagined that the very thing I had been trying to protect would become the trigger that set everything on fire. But here we were, and it was happening. I had always known there would be tension after Amy's death. The inheritance, the trust, Sophie's future. It was all a delicate balance. But I never thought Nathan would react like this. He'd always been proud, but the lengths he was willing to go to now, to manipulate, to twist the truth, those were things I hadn't seen coming. It all came crashing down when I got that phone call. "Rebecca, we need to talk," Nathan's voice came through, low and tight with anger. It wasn't the voice of the brother I had grown up with, the one I had laughed with, the one I had helped through thick and thin. This was someone else. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "What is it, Nathan?" "I've been thinking," he began, his tone icy. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you?" I froze. "Here we go." "I'm not," I began, but he cut me off. "You think you know better, don't you?" His words came out in a rush now, like they were already built up inside him, waiting to explode. "You've always thought you were better, the smarter one, the successful one, and now you're trying to take everything from me." His voice cracked, just a little, but I could hear it. The hurt, the resentment that had been festering for so long. I felt my heart drop. I hadn't expected this. I had been trying so hard to be the person who kept things together, to protect Sophie, to honor Amy's wishes. But now Nathan had twisted it into something else entirely. Nathan, I'm not trying to take anything from you, I said, my voice trembling despite my best effort. This is about Sophie. This is about protecting her future. Stop pretending like you're doing this for her, Nathan snapped. You're doing this because you want control. You want to prove you're better than me, that you can make all the decisions, that you're the one in charge now. You think you're so much smarter, so much more capable, but you're just trying to steal what's mine. I felt the blood drain from my face. Nathan, this isn't about you or me. This is about Amy's trust. She didn't trust you to manage the money for Sophie's future. She asked me to do it because she knew I would protect her. I'm not stealing anything. I'm doing what Amy asked me to do. But Nathan didn't want to hear it. He was too far gone. You think I can't handle this? You think I'm not capable? He spat, his voice growing louder. You and your perfect life, with your perfect job and your perfect little world. You think I'm just some failure you need to fix, don't you? Well, I'm not your project, Rebecca. I'm not the little brother you get to control. My head was spinning, but I stood my ground. I'm not trying to control you, Nathan. I never was. I've helped you out of love, out of family. But you need to understand that this is for Sophie. This is her future we're talking about. No, Nathan growled, his voice low with fury. This is about you. You think you're better than me, and you're using Sophie to prove it. I'm her father, Rebecca. I should be the one making decisions, not you, not you. The finality in his words was like a slap to the face. It was then that I realized it wasn't just about the trust. It was never about protecting Sophie for him. It was about Nathan's ego, about his pride, and his inability to accept that Amy had made decisions that excluded him. The line had been drawn. Nathan wasn't just angry, he was hurt. He was scared of losing control, and it didn't matter to him who got caught in the crossfire. He was willing to sacrifice our entire family dynamic, to tear everything apart, just to feel like he had some power back. I took a deep breath. You're wrong, Nathan. I'm doing what Amy asked me to do, what she trusted me to do. I'm not going to let you take this away from Sophie or from me. You're nothing but a controlling witch who thinks she knows what's best for everyone, Nathan hissed. And now you're going to make everyone else believe it too. I felt a chill go down my spine. What are you talking about? You'll see, Nathan muttered before hanging up. The click of the phone was like the final nail in the coffin. I stared at the screen in disbelief. In one short conversation, Nathan had accused me of everything from stealing to manipulating, turning my efforts to protect Sophie into something dark and twisted. I could already feel the shift in the air, the coldness between us now, the distance that would only grow with each passing day. As I stood there, staring at my phone, I felt the weight of everything crashing down. My brother, the man I had spent my whole life protecting, had just declared war, and in the process, he had torn our family apart. What was supposed to be an act of love for Sophie had now become a battlefield, one where no one would be left untouched. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the blank screen of my phone. The anger, the bitterness in Nathan's words echoed in my mind like a drumbeat I couldn't escape. I hadn't expected this. No, I hadn't even imagined it. My brother had always been someone I protected, someone I cared for. Sure, we had our differences, but I never thought it would come to this. Not with him. I replayed his words over and over. You think you're better than me. You're just trying to control everything. It hurt more than I cared to admit. My own brother, accusing me of poisoning Amy's mind, of stealing from him. It was a betrayal I wasn't ready for. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the tightness in my chest. But no matter how much I tried to reason with myself, the truth was hard to swallow. Nathan had always been the one to need help, the one who couldn't quite catch up, who relied on me more than I ever realized. But now, that help was twisted into something ugly. He wasn't just angry at the trust, at the money. He was angry at me for everything I had, everything he thought I had taken from him. And worse, he had the audacity to tell me I was the one trying to steal his family, his daughter, his life. Sophie is mine to protect, I reminded myself. I am the one who needs to protect her future. Amy had trusted me with that, and I wasn't about to back down. But I couldn't deny the emotional toll. My hand shook as I set the phone down. I had spent years building my life, making smart decisions, working hard to be there for my family, and now it felt like everything was crumbling beneath me. I had spent so much of my life taking care of Nathan, being the one who made the tough decisions, the one who picked up the pieces when things fell apart. But this was different. This wasn't just about fixing things anymore. This was about standing my ground. This was about Sophie's future. This was about my own integrity. I sat down, breathing deeply, trying to process what had just happened. My first instinct was to pick up the phone, to call Nathan, to fix it. But I knew better now. No matter how much I tried to reason with him, it wouldn't matter. His anger was so much bigger than me, than the trust. It was about the years of resentment, the years of feeling overshadowed by my success, the years of feeling like he was always the one left behind. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to keep myself together. The weight of the situation was suffocating. I had never imagined my brother, the person I had loved and supported, would turn against me like this. I knew he had his flaws, but this was a side of him I had never seen before. As the minutes passed, my anger shifted to something else. Frustration, confusion, and a deep sense of responsibility. What was I supposed to do now? How could I protect Sophie from all of this? How could I make sure she was safe, not just financially, but emotionally as well? She had already lost so much. I couldn't let her lose more, especially not because of Nathan's pride. I stood up, pacing back and forth. I needed to make sense of this. I needed to figure out how to handle Nathan, how to handle my family's division. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't about Nathan's accusations. It was about Sophie. It was about her future, her stability, and her safety. But what if I'm wrong? The thought crossed my mind, but I shoved it away. I wasn't wrong. Amy had trusted me. She had known that I would make the right decisions for Sophie, that I would protect her from everything, even from the person who was supposed to protect her the most, her own father. It was becoming clear that this wasn't going to be easy. This wasn't just about navigating the trust, about handling the money, or about convincing Nathan to see reason. This was about standing up to my brother, about standing up for what I knew was right, even if it meant alienating myself from the rest of the family. But the truth was, I couldn't just sit back and let Nathan destroy everything Amy had worked for, everything she had set in motion. She had trusted me, and I wasn't about to break that trust. Not for him, not for anyone. I felt a surge of determination rise within me. The next steps weren't going to be easy, but I had no choice. I had to fight for Sophie. I had to protect her from Nathan, from the person he was becoming. I had to make sure her inheritance was used for her, not for Nathan's selfish desires. It was going to get messy. I could feel the tension building, the storm that was about to break, but I was ready for it. I wasn't going to back down. I couldn't. And just like that, I knew what I had to do next. The days that followed Nathan's outburst were some of the longest I'd ever experienced. The air between us grew thick with hostility, and the once familiar rhythm of our family gatherings was replaced with tense silences and forced smiles. Nathan barely spoke to me, but I could feel his eyes on me every time I entered a room. It was as if he was daring me to acknowledge his anger, to give him a reason to explode again. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not with everything at stake. The hardest part wasn't just the conflict with Nathan. It was the fact that my family was splitting in two. Aunt Shirley called me one afternoon, almost crying, asking why I had taken everything from Nathan. She said he was devastated, that I had turned my back on him. My cousins wouldn't return my calls, and even my closest friends started to question my decisions. They hadn't seen what I saw, hadn't heard the things Nathan had said to me. They didn't know how deeply his anger ran, how far he was willing to go. I had expected some pushback, but this was different. It wasn't just about money or the trust. It was about my integrity, my family's belief in me, and the slow unraveling of everything I had ever worked for. I spent the next few days avoiding Nathan as much as possible, focusing on Sophie instead. I visited her school, checked in with her teachers, and made sure her days were as normal as possible. But even that wasn't easy. Sophie was withdrawn, quiet in a way that didn't sit right with me. She seemed lost. Amy's absence weighed heavily on her, but there was something more, something I couldn't quite place. And yet, when I asked her how she was doing, she smiled weakly and said everything was fine. I didn't believe her, but what could I do? Nathan had already made it clear that I wasn't welcome in his home. I had no right to push further, at least not without risking an even bigger fallout. But then came the requests. At first they were small. Sophie's school fees, a new jacket for winter, a few medical bills. I approved everything without hesitation. I knew it was part of my responsibility as trustee, and I wasn't going to make Sophie suffer because of Nathan's anger. But then the requests started getting ridiculous. Nathan asked for money to renovate the kitchen, claiming it was to make things better for Sophie. He asked for funds to buy new furniture, to make the house more comfortable for Sophie. And then, when he asked for money to take Jennifer on a vacation to Hawaii, I couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't about Sophie. This was about Nathan's desire to live as if nothing had changed. And I was the one left to foot the bill. I denied every request that didn't directly benefit Sophie, but Nathan's reaction was always the same: anger. He would shout at me, accuse me of being controlling, of being unreasonable. And when that didn't work, he started telling our extended family that I was stealing his daughter's money, that I was trying to ruin his life. I was starting to feel like a villain in my own family. One afternoon, I was sitting in my office when I got a call from my lawyer. Nathan had filed a petition to remove me as trustee, arguing that I had a conflict of interest and that I was being vindictive toward him by denying his requests. My heart sank. I knew this was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to swallow. "Rebecca," my lawyer said gently, "this is going to be a long and expensive battle. Nathan's lawyer is already preparing a case. He's going to challenge everything. His goal is to take control of the trust, to have it all in his hands. And from what I'm seeing, he's willing to fight dirty." I felt the walls closing in. Fight dirty. That's exactly what Nathan had been doing. I wasn't just his sister anymore. I was his enemy, a pawn in his game of retribution. The worst part? I knew he had already turned our family against me. I could feel the weight of their judgment. They didn't understand. They didn't know what I had been dealing with behind closed doors. They saw Nathan's pain, his anger, but they didn't see what I saw. They didn't hear the accusations, the lies. It was becoming clear that the fight wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about control. It was about Nathan trying to reclaim some power he thought he had lost. But what he didn't realize was that he wasn't just fighting me. He was fighting Amy's last wishes, and I wasn't about to let him win. That night, I went to bed later than usual, my mind racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophie's face. I could hear her soft voice asking me if everything was going to be okay, and I couldn't answer her, not yet. But I promised myself I wouldn't back down. I couldn't. I had made a promise to Amy, and I would honor it, no matter how messy this got, no matter how much my family turned against me. The next day, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't had in a while. I would continue to fight. I would continue to protect Sophie, no matter what, and I would make sure that Nathan didn't get his hands on the trust. He had already taken enough. It was time to draw the line. The darkness came slowly at first, like the quiet before a storm. For weeks, I had been bracing myself for the inevitable, doing everything I could to protect Sophie, to keep the trust intact, and to stand my ground against Nathan. But despite my efforts, the weight of it all was becoming unbearable. It wasn't just the constant legal threats or the endless accusations. It wasn't even the cold shoulder from my family, who had all but turned their backs on me. It was the quiet moments, the ones when I sat alone and let my thoughts spiral. I couldn't stop thinking about Sophie, about how much she had lost, about how she must have felt, watching her father's love for her mother turn into something else, something ugly. Watching Nathan's bitterness eat him alive while Sophie remained the quiet, steady child, trying her best to carry on. I hadn't seen her in weeks. Nathan had made it clear that I wasn't welcome in their home, that any contact with Sophie would be considered harassment. It stung. It tore at my heart each time I thought of her. But more than that, it filled me with a sense of guilt. Could I have done more to protect her from all this? The worst part was that I knew I wasn't just fighting Nathan anymore. I was fighting for Sophie's sense of stability, for the future Amy had wanted for her. And no matter how many times I reassured myself that I was doing the right thing, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I was doing was hurting Sophie more than it was helping her. The phone call from my lawyer didn't make things any better. "They're pushing forward with the petition," she said. "Nathan is determined to take control of the trust. He's not going to back down. I hate to say this, but we're heading into a battle that could take months, even years." I let her words hang in the air. Months, years. That's what it would take for this to be over, if it ever would be. And through it all, Sophie would be the one caught in the middle. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to be dragged into the mess that Nathan and I were creating. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the phone in my hand. I could feel the weight of it, the decision that was looming ahead of me. I could continue fighting, continue standing my ground. But what would that do to Sophie? What would it do to her future, to her sense of security? I thought of calling Nathan, of trying to find some way to end this. But the last time I'd tried to talk to him, it had been a disaster. He had lashed out in ways I hadn't expected. The man I had known as my brother, the one I had supported through so much, had become someone else entirely, and I couldn't help but wonder, was he really just hurt and angry, or was he capable of something darker? That thought hit me like a cold wave. Could Nathan really do something terrible? I had seen the anger in his eyes. I had heard the threats, the accusations. But this was different. This was a fear I had never felt before, a fear that went beyond my brother's pride, beyond his need to control Sophie's money. I was beginning to wonder if there was something I was missing, something I didn't want to see. The phone rang again, and I answered without looking. It was my lawyer, but this time it wasn't about the petition. "I'm sorry to call you so late," she said, her voice tight, "but I need to inform you that I've just received a report from Child Protective Services. It's about Sophie." My heart skipped a beat. What happened? Is she okay? I could hear the hesitation in my lawyer's voice. "There's been an incident. It's serious." I felt the ground shift beneath me. What incident? Sophie had always been quiet, a little withdrawn, but she had never shown any signs of being in danger. What could have happened? "They did a wellness check," my lawyer continued, "and Sophie's teacher reported some concerning behavior, some physical signs that are raising red flags." I couldn't breathe. "What physical signs?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Bruising, Rebecca, on her arms and legs. It's possible she's been hurt. The teacher doesn't know the full story, but it's enough to trigger an investigation. The CPS agent said she's not in immediate danger, but they're looking into it." My blood ran cold. Sophie, my sweet, innocent niece. The child I had promised to protect. How could this have happened? How could I have missed it? The call ended shortly after that. I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing, my body frozen. Sophie was in danger. My brother was more dangerous than I had realized. And now I had to face the terrifying reality that the situation was spiraling out of control. I couldn't let this go on. I couldn't allow Sophie to suffer any longer. I made the decision right then and there. I would do whatever it took to protect her, even if it meant confronting the one person I had tried so hard to save. The moment everything changed didn't come with loud sounds or dramatic confrontations. It came quietly, slipping into my life like a shadow that I couldn't ignore. It was a Thursday when I received the call. It wasn't from my lawyer or from Nathan. It was from Sophie's school. I had been trying to reach out to her, to send her letters, little gifts, anything to remind her that I hadn't abandoned her. But every attempt had been blocked. Nathan had made it clear that I was unwelcome, and with every passing day, it became more and more clear how far he was willing to go to keep me away. This time it was Sophie's teacher, Mrs. Patterson. She was the one who had reached out to me before when Sophie's grades had begun to slip, and I had noticed the way Sophie had withdrawn. But this time when I picked up the phone, there was no preamble. Mrs. Patterson's voice was steady but strained. "I'm sorry to bother you, Rebecca," she said, "but I wanted to let you know that Sophie has been exhibiting some concerning behavior. She's been more withdrawn than usual, and, well, I noticed some bruises on her arms and legs. I didn't want to make assumptions, but I thought you should know." My heart sank as I processed her words. Bruises? My first thought was that maybe it was just a typical child's fall, the kind of bumps and scrapes that came with roughhousing or clumsiness. But something about Mrs. Patterson's tone told me this wasn't just an accident. "Did she say anything?" I asked, my voice tight, barely above a whisper. "She didn't say much," Mrs. Patterson continued, "but it's the way she's been acting that worries me. She's quiet, withdrawn. I've noticed her behavior changing over the past few weeks. And these bruises, well, I thought you'd want to know. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I do think it's something worth looking into." I could feel the weight of her words pressing on me. The room felt suddenly smaller, suffocating. Bruises. I knew what this meant. I had seen enough to know what neglect and abuse looked like, even if it was subtle. And Sophie, my sweet niece, had been trying to hold it all in, trying to protect her father, trying to protect me. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking as I tried to gather my thoughts. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind to what was happening under my nose? But there was one thing I couldn't ignore, and it hit me like a wave. The sudden, sharp memory of something that had bothered me for weeks. Something I had almost brushed off. A few weeks earlier, I had overheard a conversation between Jennifer and Nathan, though I had pretended not to hear. It wasn't intentional, but it had stuck with me. Jennifer had been asking questions about Sophie's trust, about what would happen to the inheritance if Sophie were to die before she turned 25. I had dismissed it at the time, thinking it was just an offhand comment, something she didn't really mean. But now, with the bruises, with Sophie's strange behavior, the connection was undeniable. Jennifer had been probing for information, and now I was seeing the bigger picture. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't about a misplaced vacation fund or a renovation project. This was about Sophie's life, about what Nathan and Jennifer were willing to do to get their hands on her inheritance. My stomach twisted in knots as I realized the extent of the situation. Sophie was in danger, and I hadn't been able to see it. But now, with this new revelation, everything clicked into place. I could no longer stay passive. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine. I had to act. I picked up the phone again, dialing my lawyer. I didn't have all the evidence yet, but I knew what I had to do. I had to protect Sophie, no matter the cost. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. This was a battle for her safety, for her future, for everything Amy had fought for. "We need to move fast," I said when the lawyer picked up. "I need you to look into Nathan and Jennifer. I think they're using Sophie's inheritance as leverage for something much darker. I don't know what yet, but I'm getting the feeling that Sophie is at risk." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. My lawyer knew how serious I was. She had heard the tension in my voice, felt the weight of the situation. "I'll make some calls," she said. "But Rebecca, you need to be careful. If Nathan finds out what you're planning, he won't stop. This is going to get messy." "I know," I replied, feeling the dread settle in my chest. "But I won't let them hurt Sophie." I hung up the phone, the weight of what I was about to do crashing down on me. I had never felt more certain of anything in my life. This wasn't just a fight over money. This was a fight for Sophie's future, and no matter how deep I had to dig, no matter how much the truth hurt, I was going to make sure she was safe. The fallout came faster than I ever expected, and it wasn't just from Nathan. It spread through my entire life like wildfire, burning through every connection I thought I had, every relationship I thought was solid. I had made the call to my lawyer, but it didn't take long for the effects of that decision to ripple outward. Within days, Nathan's anger turned into something far worse. He escalated the situation with a level of venom I had never seen before. It wasn't just the petition to remove me as trustee anymore. It wasn't just the phone calls or the angry messages. It was the campaign. The smear campaign. He had gone straight to our extended family, to anyone who would listen, and painted me as a villain, a thief, a manipulator. And it worked. The family who had once been my support system, the people who had watched me grow, who had seen me make every sacrifice for my brother and for them, turned against me. Aunt Shirley, who had always been my closest confidant, called me, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Rebecca," she said, the hurt clear in her voice. "Nathan's been telling everyone you've been stealing from him, that you've been scheming to take Sophie away. I don't know what to think." My heart broke at the sound of her voice. I had always been the one to protect my family, to hold us together. Now it felt like I was falling apart. I tried to explain, tried to make her understand that this wasn't about money, that it was about Sophie's future. But the words felt hollow, like they didn't matter anymore. "I never wanted this, Aunt Shirley," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "This isn't about me. It's about Sophie, about protecting her. Amy asked me to do this. She trusted me." But Aunt Shirley didn't answer. She just sighed and said, "I wish you would have thought of that before you went and did this. Maybe if you'd just let Nathan handle it, things would be different." I knew then that the damage had been done. Nathan had poisoned everyone's minds, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't undo it. It wasn't just about the trust anymore. It was about how they saw me, how they thought of me now. I was no longer the supportive sister, the responsible one. I was the villain in their eyes, the one who had stolen from Nathan and manipulated Amy's will. But the worst part? The worst part was when Nathan made good on his threat. He sent me a letter from his lawyer, official, cold, demanding. He was filing to have me removed as trustee. He wanted control of Sophie's inheritance, and he wasn't going to stop until he got it. He accused me of being vindictive, of using Sophie's trust to punish him for everything that had happened in the past. He claimed I was trying to take Sophie away from him, to destroy his family. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the letter, the words swirling in my head, and all I could think was that I was losing. I had been trying to do the right thing, to protect Sophie, and now it was all falling apart. Everything I had worked for, the life I had tried so hard to build, was slipping through my fingers. I knew that Nathan wouldn't stop. He had no limits. He had already shown that with how he was treating Sophie, with how he was treating me. And I couldn't let him get away with it. I couldn't let him use his power to hurt her, to hurt me. So I did the only thing I could think of. I pushed back. I called my lawyer, told her to file the response immediately. I wasn't going to let him have the trust. Not now, not ever. I wasn't going to let him win. But that wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Within days, my phone rang again. This time, it was a call from the school. "We need to talk about Sophie," Mrs. Patterson said. Her voice was tight, strained. "There's been an incident." I felt the world tilt beneath me. What happened? Is she okay? Mrs. Patterson paused for a moment before speaking. "Sophie has been having trouble at school, emotionally, mostly. But today, there was an incident. She was in the nurse's office for an extended period of time. The school staff has some concerns." I could feel my chest tightening. My breath became shallow. "What kind of concerns?" "The bruises are showing more now," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "We're worried she's not being properly cared for. It's not just physical, it's emotional too. We're seeing signs of neglect." I felt like I was choking. My hands shook as I put the phone down, unable to process what I had just heard. My niece, my beautiful, innocent niece. She had been suffering, she had been in pain, and I hadn't seen it. The truth was impossible to ignore. I had known something was off, but I had kept telling myself that it was nothing, that everything was fine, but it wasn't fine. Sophie was in danger, and I had to do something. I couldn't wait for this to get better on its own. I couldn't wait for Nathan to come to his senses. So I made the call. I contacted Child Protective Services again. This time I had no choice but to take action. I couldn't let Sophie suffer in silence anymore. She was my responsibility now, and I would protect her with everything I had. The investigation into Nathan and Jennifer escalated quickly after that, but it wasn't just about the trust anymore. It was about everything that had been hidden beneath the surface, the emotional neglect, the manipulation, and the damage that had already been done. As the days passed, it became clear that Sophie's safety was now the priority. I didn't know how this would all end, but I was certain of one thing. I was going to fight for her. I would protect her, no matter the cost. In the end, everything came crashing down like a house of cards. The legal battle, the accusations, the broken family ties, all of it spiraled out of control, but in a way, it needed to. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine anymore, and neither could anyone else. Sophie's case, the investigation, and the eventual intervention by Child Protective Services, it all happened fast. Nathan's threats, his lies, and the smear campaign against me came to a head when the truth was revealed. Sophie had been abused. Jennifer was arrested for child abuse and attempted murder. Nathan was left to pick up the pieces of a life he couldn't control anymore. The truth about Sophie's bruises, her being locked out of the house, her withdrawn behavior, it all came to light in ways I had never imagined. What I had suspected, what I had feared for so long, was more horrible than I could have ever imagined. And yet, in the end, it was the truth that saved her. The courtroom was a blur of faces, legal jargon, and emotion. But when the judge granted me temporary custody of Sophie, when I held her in my arms and felt her small body shake against mine, I knew that everything I had done, the legal battles, the sacrifices, the isolation from my family, was worth it. Sophie was safe now. Nathan had lost. And even though the damage was done, even though we couldn't undo the past, I could hold my niece and know that I had fought for her, that I had protected her in the only way I knew how. The rest of my family, the ones who had once stood by me, had to come to terms with what had happened. Some of them still didn't understand. Some still thought I was the one who had taken everything from Nathan, but I wasn't interested in changing their minds anymore. What mattered was Sophie. She had gone through so much. Her mother, her father, the family she thought she knew, everything had been turned upside down. But through it all, she found her way back to me, and I would make sure she never felt unsafe again. As for Nathan, I wasn't angry anymore. I was sad. For him, for what he had become. I couldn't change his choices, but I could ensure that he wouldn't hurt Sophie again. He had lost the right to be her guardian, to control her future. Sophie was with me now, and we would rebuild. It wouldn't be easy, but we would do it together. We would create new memories, new bonds, and a new sense of safety and security. I would be the guardian Amy had asked me to be, the one who protected Sophie, no matter the cost. I looked down at Sophie, who had fallen asleep in my arms, her face peaceful for the first time in what felt like forever. She was finally safe. And that, more than anything, was the greatest gift I could have ever given her,